imagined as shining knights in perfect armor, but the truth was far more diverse and practical. Most fighters were common men, wearing padded jackets, old mail, or whatever protection they could afford, while true plate armor came much later, and only for the wealthy. Battlefields were filled with mud, patched equipment, and weapons chosen for survival rather than glamour. Understanding what soldiers really looked like reveals a world much grittier and more human than the myths suggest. Number 1. The Knight in Shining Armor. Fact versus fantasy. The familiar silhouette of a mirror-bright warrior on a massive horse comes from late medieval pageantry and later art, not from most of the Middle Ages. For much of the period, a fighting man who held knightly status looked practical rather than theatrical. A quilted gambeson next to the skin for cushioning, a knee-length mail hauberk over it, a conical helmet with a nasal bar, and a tall kite shield painted for recognition. The sword hung at the hip as a sidearm, but a stout spear or lance did the real work, on foot or in the saddle. By the 13th century, the shield shrank into the heater shape. A cloth surcoat covered the mail to keep sun and rain off the rings, and helmets grew boxier into great helms for the shock of the charge. Under that steel box, the face was invisible. The heroic, open-faced look belongs more to romance than to battle. 14th century change is where fantasy and reality start to get confused. Plates appear first as hidden reinforcements, coat of plates, or brigandine riveted under fabric, then spread to limbs and joints, while the bassinet with a visor and mail aventail replaces the barrel helm. By the 15th century, a full harness from Milan or Augsburg offered head-to-toe coverage with shaped breastplates, folds, articulated elbows and knees, and sabatons for the feet. Yet the gleam was not a constant mirror shine. Polished steel existed, but working armor picked up oil, soot, dents, and field repairs. The famous weight problem is overstated. A typical complete harness weighed roughly as much as modern firefighting gear and carried the load over the hips and shoulders. A trained man-at-arms could run, mount, vault, and wrestle. The myth of cranes and winches belongs to tournament theatrics or Victorian imagination. Vulnerable zones still mattered armpits, visor slits, inner thighs, and weapons adapted accordingly. Estocks, rondel daggers, maces, warhammers, and the knightly pollux to stun or pierce rather than slice through steel. Another distortion is social. The knight was a minority. Most soldiers in medieval armies were infantry levies, town militias, or professionals wearing padded jackets, bits of old mail, and a helmet if fortune allowed. Even among elites, not every mounted fighter was a noble knight. Many were men-at-arms of varied rank with serviceable mismatched equipment. Horses, too, rarely wore full plate. Bards and chanfrons appear in wealthier contexts and later centuries. The real knight's look shifts by century and region, shaped by metallurgy, money, and purpose. Serviceable layers first, selective plates next, refined harness last. Always more mud, sweat, and maintenance than glitter. Number 2. Armor and weapons. The look of a medieval fighting man follows materials, money, and method. Layers first for blunt protection. Metal added where risk and budget met. Weapons chosen for reach, leverage, or puncture rather than theatrical slashing. At the base sat the padded gambeson-stitched linen stuffed with wool or tow, which absorbed shock, prevented mail from biting into skin, and offered real protection on its own for poorer infantry. Over that, the common step-up was mail. A riveted hauberk with mittens or separate gauntlets, plus a coif, flexible like fabric, yet resistant to cuts. It shrugged off most edge blows, but remained vulnerable to concentrated thrusts at joints and gaps. Early helmets were conical with a nasal, evolving into enveloping great helms for the joust and battlefield shock, then into bassinets with visors and mail aventails that balanced coverage and sight. 14th century solutions hid plates under cloth coat of plates, and later brigandine before plate crept onto elbows, knees, thighs, and shins, finally becoming full harness by the 15th century, with shaped breastplates, articulated couters and polins, and sabatons. Weight clustered near 20 to 30 kilograms in a well-fitted suit, hung from hips and shoulders via an arming doublet with laces, points, allowing a trained man-at-arms to run, grapple, mount, and fight without the mythical clumsiness. Surfaces were more often oiled, blued, or dulled by use than mirror bright. Maintenance scraping rust, re-riveting, replacing straps defined the working appearance as much as design. Shields reveal role and period. Big kite shields for mounted warfare and body coverage. Compact heater shields, once plate took over more protection. And the tall, curved pavis for crossbowmen and urban militias during sieges and street fighting. Wood cores faced with leather or canvas were painted for unit identity and quick recognition in dust and smoke. Weapons track function first. The spear dominates because it is cheap, teachable, and deadly at reach. Its ash shaft and leaf or socketed head made it the infantry standard in levy and professional hands alike. The knight's sword, initially a one-handed arming sword, served as sidearm and status, later joined by hand and a half and true longswords, better for armored fencing and leverage. Against armor, edges yielded to geometry. Estocks with stiff, narrow blades. Rondel daggers to probe armpits or visor gaps. Maces, flanged maces, and war hammers to transmit shock and deform plate. The poleaxe, a knightly favorite, combined hammer, spike, and axe to wrestle plate-clad opponents at close range. Polearms for infantry bill, halberd, glaive, and spear derivatives gave formations reach and hooking power to unhorsed riders or pull shields aside. Ranged arms were a system, not a myth of arrows punching plate. Self-bows and powerful longbows punished unarmored or lightly armored targets, filled the air with hazard and harried horses. Heavy crossbows with steel prods delivered slow but concentrated shots, their bolts dangerous to mail at short range and to plate where angles and distance favored penetration. Equipment mirrored wallets and logistics. Wealthy retainers in matched harnesses from Milanese or German workshops. Men-at-arms mixing older pieces with new. Town militias in gambesons, kettle hats, and spears. Mercenaries specializing with pikes or crossbows. Horse armor used mainly by elites and late, often partial rather than full barding. Salvage, inheritance, and repair created the patchwork reality. Straps replaced with rawhide. Visor pivots peened anew. Brigandine plates added under a faded surcoat. The result on campaign was less parade than toolbox layers tuned to role, climate, and risk. Weapons chosen for tasks from holding a line to breaking one, and a constantly evolving balance between protection, mobility, and what a lord, city, or soldier could actually afford. Number 3. Daily life of a soldier. Dawn began with the clatter of pots, the hiss of damp firewood, and the slow scrape of whetstones on iron. A soldier's morning meant checking feet before checking blades. Cracked heels and blisters decided marching speed more often than enemy plans. Clothing went on in layers linen shirt and hose, then the padded gambeson and straps were tightened on greaves, or a simple kettle hat if nothing else was available. The gambeson doubled as blanket at night and padding by day, and it soaked up sweat until it needed to be aired like a tent canvas. Breakfast rarely impressed. Coarse bread, pottage thickened with whatever the quartermasters or foragers found, and small beer because water near camps turned suspect fast. Salted pork or dried fish appeared when supply wagons kept pace. Otherwise, a handful of peas or onions stood in for protein. Rations tasted of smoke and grit, but predictability mattered more than flavor. Marching set the rhythm of most campaigns. 15 to 20 miles on uneven roads was normal when commanders pushed, less when wagons bogged down or horses needed fodder. Loads were stubbornly heavy. Weapons, a mess kit, a spare pair of hose if luck allowed, and sometimes stakes for field works. Horses in mounted retinues required their own morning routines. Hooves cleaned, shoes checked, manes brushed out to keep skin infections away, because a lame destrier disabled its rider as surely as a wound. Camp life revolved around fire and order. Tents clustered by company or retinue, with picket lines for animals and a ditch when time allowed. Waste was meant for pits downwind, but discipline decided whether disease stayed away. Commanders who enforced latrine rules saved more lives than the bravest charge. Lice and fleas were constant companions. Hair was cropped short under helmets, not for fashion, but to make vermin easier to control. Firewood, forage, and water shaped map decisions as much as castles did, so scouts checked streams and mills, while the carpenters and pioneers cut brush, repaired wagons, and threw up simple earthworks. Training fit between duties. Knights and men-at-arms wrestled in armor to learn balance and leverage, drilling with poleaxe, sword, and shield. Archers pulled heavy bows to keep muscles tuned. Pikemen practiced braced formations and the slow, stubborn pivot that kept points toward cavalry. Even levies repeated the basics, holding a line, grounding a spear, looking for signals, because steadiness under noise and dust outweighed cleverness. Signals came from banners, trumpet calls, and the drumbeat of messengers' horses. Visibility mattered, so surcoats and badges helped men find their spot in the swirl. Pay reached hands irregularly. Professional soldiers expected coin on set days, but arrears were common, and commanders issued tallies or promises when chests ran light. Plunder and ransoms filled the gap in many regions, which turned discipline into a daily negotiation between maintaining order and keeping men content enough to stand their ground. Camp followers, craftsmen, cooks, sutlers, armorers, grooms, and families kept the army functional, mending straps, patching gambesons, rebuckling harnesses, and selling food or wine at markup. Medical care mixed experience with prayer. Field surgeons cut away crushed flesh, stitched clean cuts, cauterized where bleeding ran dangerously, and splinted broken